We have a database. I mean, nowadays it's a database, but back in the days it probably used to be like a paper book, right? It's called Handelsregister, which is a little bit of a dusty name for the database in which we register all the companies, right? And actually we've been doing this since 1803, and it was actually Napoleon who decided that he wanted to know the names and the owners of all the companies within the different regions that France conquered at the time. So they came up with some law, and they forced basically all the Netherlands and Belgium, etc., to start registering the companies. And so we've been around since 1803. So you can imagine the type of legacy that we have within our organization, right? That's next level legacy. And currently we have about in the current Handelsregister that we have now, there's about 6 million active and inactive companies. Now you might be thinking, like, why inactive? Because the law says that an inactive company still, for example, if you liquidate a company, you're still required by law to keep the books around for 4 years, and there's a few things like that. So that's why we still track these. Also, if you wanted to know, for example, a company that you're doing business with, are they actually still legally operating or not, right? So you can actually check. So there's about 6 million records. Now, these are company registrations, right? Now, for each company, there's actually a lot of different things that we track. So it's not just the name of the company or the address that they're registered at. We track, things like what do they actually do? So the company description. For the people that were in the Netherlands during COVID, you guys might recall the government decided to give certain grants, but those grants were based on something called an SBI code, which was the code that actually said what it is that your company did. So they decided, like, only if you were like an artist, then you would not get a grant. However, if you were a baker, then you would, right? So these were based, for example, on the data that we track within the KVK, the SBI codes. So these are the type of things that we track, right? But we also track, for example, the incorporation documents, which actually mention like what the rights and what the duties are of each shareholder, etc. Right? It's tracked in there. If you have any side letters when you start the company, for example, you decide that if you ever sell the company, then you're not getting any of the profits, right? We can put it in the side letter. We track that. We track who the founders are. We track if there's a change in shareholders. We track that. We track the executives that might not have an ownership stake, but that are allowed to make certain changes, or to like, for example, place orders up to 50,000 euros. We know who these people are, right? We know everything about them. We know when they were born. We know where they were born. We know where they live, etc. You know, we have all this information. Changes in representation, etc. So there's a lot of these type of things, but also fiscal information. We track, for example, how much money a public company made last year. We track, etc. So we have these things. Obviously, bankruptcy, etc. So as you can see, next to just the basic company registration data, we have all these things. Now, as you can imagine, in these 6 million records, plus all the, all the sub branches of all these records, there's interesting stuff in there. For example, we have journalists that work for various news organizations, and they might have what we call a sole proprietorship. Not sure how you pronounce it, but an eenmanszaak. That's how we call it in Dutch. And usually their home address is also their registered company address. It's tracked in the KVK, and there have been in the past instances in which people actually went to the company registration, found their company, found their home address, went to their house, and did nasty things. So this is, for example, one of the sensitive things. But also, same is true with high-ranking military officials. Some of them, they do consulting on the side. They have businesses, and you can actually find out where they live, right? So this is actually quite sensitive data. These things we already spoke about. In any case, we don't. I'm sure, like there are people out there that would find these things interesting to mine them for certain patterns and certain data. For example, let's say there's a company that's supplying software to the governments, right? Might be here in the EU, might be in the US, or wherever. Now, if you can find out that they're actually sort of having financial issues, right? things like that can be exploited. Ownership structures, social engineering, etc. There's a lot of these things that can be misused. Actually, the data that we have within the KVK is considered part of the critical infrastructure of the Netherlands. So it's actually labeled as part of that infrastructure that's supposed to survive wars, COVID, things like that, So I just put up some flags of people that might, countries that might be interested in our type of data, right? And you can kind of figure that out for yourself. But I was just talking about one of my colleagues, like even the US, like we share a lot of our economical data with the US. Is it actually something we should be doing? It's not up to me to decide, but it's an interesting question. In any case, we have to be careful with the data that we have and we have to protect it, right? Now, how do we protect it? Obviously, we have a firewall, right? It's a little bit simplified. The basic rule is that our company registration data cannot live in any cloud. It has to live within the IT infrastructure that's provided by the KVK, or might even be part of the Rijksoverheid. I'm not sure. But in any case, like we use, like a lot of companies out there, we use cloud. We store stuff on cloud. But our handelsregister is never stored on any type of cloud. That's the basic rule. Even if, for some reason, we share parts of the handelsregister, which we do, for example, law enforcement. Let's say the police is investigating some case of fraud, and there are some companies that are intertwined, that they need to know, like, okay, this person, which companies do they own? They can request this data from us, and we actually give it to them. Well, but we know why they're requesting it, and there's probably like a legal, I'm not sure. I don't actually know, but I'm assuming there's some sort of court order that makes us release this data, etc. So we track these things, right? And this is also another interesting thing is that the EU is actually currently writing laws that will force a lot of the company registrations, like the KVK, to make the basic data set that we have about company registrations open and free. Well, free. Actually, the funny thing is within the KVK, they don't like it when we say free because we're supposed to say free of charge, which is different than free, apparently. But in any case, some of this data will need to be shared in the future. So that, we're still kind of struggling, like, okay, yeah, but, we have to share the data, but obviously, nobody will like it when their home address is just out there open on the internet. So we have to think about, okay, how do we balance, privacy and data protection and security with this law that says that we actually have to share it, the data, right? So, on the other hand, it's 2024. Open source, open core, open data, these things are very common. It's a lot of companies that are sharing things, making lots, their software open source, etc. So, if you want to stay relevant, you have to kind of be part of that trend. And, we would actually, again, a lot of people might think about the KVK as like a dusty old, affair where people, there's a lot of old, boring people. It's actually not true, it's a new generation, and we would actually love to actually share this data and to see, like, okay, what do people out there, what are they able to do it? So we started to think about, okay, how can we do this in a responsible way? So the answer is actually synthetic data. Before I continue, does anyone have any question, or is there anything you would want to know? Just raise your hand. Okay.
Yes, I think you can just buy all the information, right, on the KVK for all the companies. So how come it's protected? It's not protected if you can just buy it.
You cannot. You can actually buy data, but you cannot buy all the information for all the companies. It's actually, you have to provide a very specific set of data, subset of data that you want, and even then I think it's limited up to a certain number of records. However, I have good news for you. There's a new EU law being written right now. I think it will go in effect in about like a year or 1.5, maybe 2 max, I'm not entirely sure, which will actually the law says that it will be forbidden to do any type of commercial acquisition based on basic company registration data, like KVK. So that whole thing that's currently happening with people buying data, that will not be allowed anymore. Any other questions? Okay, let's continue. So, synthetic data. What is synthetic data? So I kind of gave you guys the background about like what it is that we do, what kind of data we have, and why it can be difficult to actually, just like dump this data on the internet and be like, good luck, right? Synthetic data is basically fake data. Basically. I assume most of the people sitting here are developers who have some sort of technical background. So you're probably familiar with like mock data and these type of things, which you write unit tests and you need all sorts of fake data. But synthetic data is actually based on a real data set. And we use, and it actually mimics the real data set as close as possible. Basically, it means like if you, let's say you have a table in your database with user information, there's a first name, there's a last name, there's an email address. There will still be like a first name and a last name and an email address, but the first name might be fake, the last name might be fake, the email address might be fake, but the structure of the data is the same. Now, in our case, for example, we have a number which is called the KVK number, which is the company identification, the company ID, you could say. We will still have KVK numbers. They will still conform to our rule of what a KVK number looks like. I think it's like 10 digits, and there's some rule, right? That rule will still be applied, but the numbers themselves will actually not be real. So if you were to go to the KVK website and try to find a company based on that KVK number, it won't actually exist. But if you look at the data just at a glance, it actually looks like it's real. That's sort of the idea behind synthetic data. And synthetic data is generated by using AI models, which are trained actually on the real data. So you have these machine learning models which look at the real data and learn what the patterns are, and then based on those patterns, they generate new data. That's kind of what it does. Now, the synthetic data set that we have, for example, that, when you build a synthetic data set, you actually have kind of a slider, right? What percentage of the real data, it's not a real slider, but as a builder of a synthetic data set, this is like a variable that you can play around with. Like what part of the data do you want to be real, right? So in our case, for example, if you were to look at our synthetic data set, and we'll actually have a look at it in a bit, you'll see that parts of it are actually real. It's real data. So for example, we have a KVK number which is fake, but we have a address which is real. And I'll talk about this in a bit more detail. So synthetic data does not mean that the full thing is fake. It can be fake if you want it to be fake, but you can also have this mix and match. That's the cool thing here. And another benefit of a proper synthetic data set is that it can be used as a full drop-in replacement for your production data. And I'll talk about this use case as well in a bit. Now, what does it look like? This is, for example, this is an actual screenshot from our production SQL server. But this is my company, so this I can actually share this. We generate synthetic data, and what happens is you see, for example, the name of the company gets changed, right? You see for example, the first column is still the same. The second column was actually changed. That's the KVK number. The third one was changed. The fourth one is actually still the same. So that's real data. So if you wanted to like find this, let's say you wanted to know a pattern of how many companies, for example, have this, there's this column, it's called maatschappelijke activiteit ID, which is like it's kind of a unique identifier for this company. So let's say you wanted to find that, you would still be able to find it in the synthetic data set. It would still be there. But would you actually know like what company it is, what the company name is, or what its KVK number is? No, you would not be able to determine that from the synthetic data set because that has been replaced during the process.
You said real addresses, but the addresses don't match the real address.
Well, the address actually still, like for example, I didn't put this address in this screenshot, but the address would actually still be the same in both.
It would be easy to still
Yes, you are right. However, what we did is for example, we didn't put house numbers in there. And if you have the zip code, we remove the, so for example, Dutch zip code is 4 digits and 2 letters, right? So we remove the letters. So if you look at the distribution of the number of companies in that combination, like it becomes so large that you cannot actually find back anymore which company it was exactly. If you had the house number and the exact zip code, then yeah, you would kind of be able to reverse engineer the data. But the way we did it, you cannot actually. You can still run statistical analysis, like how many companies are active, for example, in this neighborhood in Utrecht. You could be able to still answer that query. What the exact companies is that owns this building, you would not be able to determine. Yeah.
But why would you provide incorrect data?
Why would we provide incorrect data?
Yeah.
Privacy law. We're actually not allowed to provide correct data.
So you can choose to not provide any of the incorrect data, just leave it.
Well, for example, remember I talked about a testing use case? So let's say if you want to run like tests on the data set. Actually, it's a good question because it also determines like who we are providing the data to, right? So let's say if...
it will be great, but for externally use, yeah, you won't want to provide incorrect data.
We chose to provide incorrect data because it mimics the real data. It's easier to look at the structure and mimic sort of the data. Because let's say if you want to build something, you want to do an experiment, and you want to, for example, build a map, and you lay out different companies on the map. You could do it based on the data, and you would have fake company names. Is it actually useful? It depends on your use case. That's not up to us to decide.
Yeah, for testing it will be okay, but for production,
Yeah, so this data set would not actually be used for production, right? It would only be used for testing. Testing, it would be used for example, we have departments within sister organizations like Cadastre, for example, who want to run certain statistical analysis, like how many companies in each region we have. They can use the data set and get this answer. They would not know which companies these are.
Yeah,
I think we have another question in the back.
Thanks. So does it mean you have different data set based on test cases, use cases and test cases?
No, we have one data set. It's up to you if you want to like what you want to do with it.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
So when you want to build a synthetic data set, there are actually two approaches that you can use, which are like you can actually train an AI model and generate synthetic data set, which we call native synthetic data. So that's a full AI solution. But there's actually also a simpler solution, which, in some cases is actually also enough, which is, well, I'll talk about the benefits in a bit, but basically which is a copy and mock. What that does is it basically copies, let's say you have a source data set, 6 million records, 40 columns. It will copy the exact 6 million records and 40 columns. And then for certain columns, it will just change, like what you saw in the example, it will just change like a company name. It will just change a postal code or whatever. So that's the second solution. Now, the benefits of the first solution is if you actually train an AI model is it keeps all the characteristics alive of the data. And depending on your use case, the results might or might not be what you want, but it does not match the exact row count of your source data set. So if you have, let's say you have 6 million records, then you have enough data to generate 6 million records. That should not be a big problem. But let's say if you have 5,000 records, you cannot generate 6 million unique records. That's not what the model can do. You could generate 5,000, maybe 6,000, maybe 3,000. It depends on the characteristic of the data set. But because it's AI and it needs training data, you need a significant amount of training data to properly be able to use this solution. The other disadvantage of using this, although it is a good solution and it's actually very nice when it works, but you actually need quite some resources because you need to train a AI model. And for the people that have played around with this, it's like you can't use your homegrown CPU to do something like this. It requires actual deployment of GPUs and a whole cluster of these things, etc. So it can be kind of complicated.
So using the train and generate approach, how do you ensure that your model's not actually leaking real PII data that it was trained on?
Good question. So, and I'll mention this in a bit as well. We've looked at, actually we've used two solutions for this. So these are out-of-the-box solutions of a few different vendors. And they actually have built-in checks that basically look at the original data set and look at the generated data set and see if there is any leakage of data. So they have this stuff built in. Now with the second approach, the copy and mock, basically, as I said, you have 40 columns, it just copies the 40 columns, and you have to kind of identify yourself, okay, you know what, this one we don't want to copy over, but we want to mock it, this one's fine, etc. So you kind of have to do it manually. The benefits are it will keep the exact same number of rows. So if you have 6 million source records, you get 6 million target. If you have 5,000 source, you get 5,000 in your target. And also, yeah, so basically it's one giant for loop, right? It just goes through the whole thing and just copies it over. And as I said, this can be done on like a pretty simple server. You know, you don't need like insane amount of resources. It will kind of run. So it kind of depends which one of these would work better for you. How much source data do you have? By the way, we have someone in the back there. How many source records do you have? How many target records do you need? And do you actually have the hardware resources to run the first approach?
Hi. I'm wondering if you've ever thought of or tried like a schema-based approach. So basically, I'm interested in learning about synthetic data for testing purposes. And I don't know much about the first approach you described, so thanks for sharing. But have you ever thought about basically generating data based on the schemas themselves rather than this copy and mock approach using a third-party library or something?
Yes, sort of, I guess. And with schema approach, you mean, let's say we have a schema of our handelsregister, and then we have some tool that just looks at like the column names and types and then generates data.
Yeah, exactly. Like you know what fields and types you have, and you have utilities to generate pseudo-random data based on those schemas.
We've thought about it. You see the downside of that, at least, we haven't actually tried it. It's just like a theoretical exercise with it. The downside of that we actually thought, and I might be wrong, and maybe you have experience with this and can actually elaborate, but the result would not actually be close to the original data set that we actually want to give to people. It would be actual fake data, like really fake. And if you look like at one glance at the data, it would be like, this is fake, right?
Yeah, I understand for sharing with, like you say, stakeholders. Masking is safer because it more closely matches.
Exactly. And the other reason is actually like on the fake, even on the fake data set that the synthetic data set that we gave you, I should say, you can still run statistical queries. And the data that those statistical queries return is actually accurate. For example, how many new restaurants opened in Q4 of 2023 in the center of Utrecht? You can actually ask the synthetic data set this question, and the answer that it gives you will be the same as what you would get on the real data set. And if we went for the schema approach, then that would not be possible.
Cool, thanks.
But then we have someone here. This is for the recording, by the way.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, but that really depends on the use case, right? So referring to my first question, that's why I asked if you have different data set based on the use cases, because the use case you gave, like number of restaurants opened, last 6 months, is very specific use case. So you have to generate your data based on that consideration, based on that configuration, right?
No, not necessarily.
No?
Not necessarily. Like for example, that.
But data has to be correct, right? To some extent.
Yeah, the synthetic
data. Only
some
certain data has to be mocked.
For example, what I mentioned is we have like real postal codes in the data set, right? Company names are fake. The numbers, the IDs, the KVK numbers are fake, but the postal codes are real. So if you And actually, and maybe this is something for next year, or if you guys are interested in this stuff, we can arrange something at KVK. This is why we exist, right? Like with AI, you can actually, so what we did together with Butter, we did a few experiments, right? We load this data into an LLM, and we just basically tell it to generate a query to fire off against our synthetic data. And it works surprisingly well. So you can actually ask the LLM, like, okay, I want to know how many restaurants went bankrupt last quarter. Or even as, and this is something we're still trying out, but like, is it a good idea to start a new restaurant on this address? Right? And the LLM actually is able to infer from the data set, okay, what would the SQL query be that I need to generate to figure out how many restaurants were started? And then we have a table which shows all the sort of interactions on each company as well. So you can figure out what it means for a company to go bankrupt. It will generate a SQL statement, it will execute it, and the RAG will return the answer. Like, it's not really part of this session, but these are the type of things that we are actually able to do based on this data set.
And have you described what PII is? Have I missed it? Or?
Sorry, PII is actually personal identifiable information, so personal data. I have, how much time do I have? 10 minutes? Sorry, one more question there.
Yeah, so the first approach is to have it like generated with AI. So you need your own stuff for that. So it's very expensive, I think, for at least for small companies. And the second one, you say it's poor man's solution. You could do it with Python. You make a script.
Exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, there's also a lot of products that already do this.
Yes. Yeah.
So what about that? Is that for the rich man's synthetic data, or is
it depends on your budget? Actually,
that's been done for years, I think.
Yeah. I guess so. We actually, so there's a few different products that we looked at. I think we have time. I'll do it very quickly because, so there is, for example, this is one of the products. This is actually a Dutch company which we've partnered with, and they're providing a solution. It's called Syntho. You can actually check the website if you're interested. And this is kind of their product, and they have you can see here two sort of I don't even know how to call it, but basically you can either synthesize or you can put it in what they call de-identificeren, which is what would translation of that be? The something, I don't know. So basically, let's say for example we want to do the poor man's approach using a tool, right? So this is what this second grouping here would do. So this is already fake data. So this is already part of our synthetic data set. Now, let's say if I wanted to change the, let's pick something. Let's say I wanted to change the KVK number, right? So you could click here, and you could tell it to mock this column, and then use, let's say, I think they have a number generator. Yeah, so you can actually put like a regular expression here, which would say like I want 10 digits. They have to start with 0 and something like this. So you would do something like that, save it, and then you would do this for a few different columns, hit this button, and then it would do that, right? So yes, this tool Syntho, it can actually do that. There's another tool we're looking at which is called Gretel. Yeah, it's an American company. And they are a bit more advanced than Syntho as far as we've looked at them. But it has some downsides, especially we are a governmental entity, so as soon as you say Dutch company, then they always have like a plus, as it should be. But yeah, so the tooling can actually also kind of do this. So I won't go into a full sort of demo of the tool. It's not our tool, it's just something we use. But we have also looked at the option of just doing a few Python scripts and just doing this ourselves. It's also very viable, actually. So let me just see some of the use cases we've kind of talked about how many companies went bankrupt within the first 3 years of operation group by sector. And actually, guys, nowadays I don't even write these queries anymore. I just ask ChatGPT to write them for me. This works really well for the people that haven't tried it. Which postcode had the most startups during the COVID pandemic? Draw a heat map on top of some Google map. for all medical companies in the Netherlands. So these are the type of things that you can actually just do on top of the synthetic data set. And this is just some stuff I came up with. For automated and regression testing, of course, our internal testers are really like dying for this. They want to be able to test against production use cases, but obviously we cannot use production data, right? Again, you want to keep they don't have a legal basis to get the PII, which is the personal identifiable information, names, BSN numbers. KVK number is actually considered by law be PII data, right? So how do they test? Right now, they just literally go and create themselves fake company registrations and then test against those. It's not ideal, but with these type of solutions, we can actually provide this to them. And yeah, like I said, it's a drop-in solution. You just take the synthetic data, instead of pointing it to the UAT database, production database, sorry, point into this synthetic database, and the whole thing works. It's exactly the same. Let's just skip this for a bit. I mentioned about these tools that we use, right? So for Syntho is one, and Gretel is the other one. And obviously, we also noticed that there are some challenges with these. They're very resource hungry. And at KVK, we have decent infrastructure to be able to run these, but you guys work for various companies. It's not always easy to get like a GPU cluster. That's a process, right? And it makes it increases the barrier to actually be able to use these. Yeah, so by the way, these are if you guys want to have a look, then you can just check their websites, syntho.ai, they're based here in the Netherlands. And then there's gretel.ai, which is, I think they're out of Washington, I believe, somewhere, yeah. So one of the possible solutions, we already spoke about this, roll your own Python scripts. If you want to actually have this balance between, you have some resources, but not a lot, and you want to actually train a model to generate data, they are using Python and all this AI tooling. You can actually do some of these things. It's doable, and usually you will find that in terms of it's less resource hungry than using an out-of-the-box solution which just says, yeah, give me a Kubernetes cluster with 5 GPUs and then let's talk, right? So that's definitely something you can consider. Now, what we've done is obviously we've generated this data set, the synthetic data set. Now, you'll notice that I don't know if I actually said that, but there's 6.1 million records in our production data set, but there's 5.8 million records in our synthetic data set. We've actually taken some things out. I started the session with mentioning these, for example, these examples of these journalists, etc. So we have certain indicators of addresses that we never ever want to expose, even not by accident, right? So things like that we've taken out. Oh, this slide was, by the way, the idea was that we had some more stats. I'm not sure what happened with that. I think I might, okay, it disappeared. So what can you do with this data set? You can do time series analysis of company activity, geographical mappings of companies, trend analysis for different categories like performance, how are they doing, etc. Sentiment analysis, you can look at the descriptions that people put when they start a company and how, is there some change in there, etc. I don't know. This is basically something that we want to share with the world and see what you guys come up with, right? Maybe even spot new business opportunities. That would be cool. What can you not do with this data set? See who owns which company and what percentage of it, see the names, etc. Find addresses, people, companies, etc. Like I said, you cannot find the home addresses, specific journalists. If you want to go bug them, you cannot do that. Or use the list for sales prospecting. There's not enough data in here to actually go and start calling people because you want to sell them something. We have a hackathon coming up. So on the 13th and the 14th of June, which is, I think, roughly 3 weeks, KVK is organizing a hackathon. There's actually about 3,000 euros that you can win in total. And people that participate in this hackathon will actually also get this data set. This is something that we will release in a few months to the public. So if you are interested in a couple of months, check out the KVK website. But at this hackathon, the people that participate, they will get this data set, and there are a few other ones as well. And the idea is that within, well, you guys know what a hackathon is, right? All night long, you go and you hack on some idea with a team of people and see if you can actually do something cool with this data set. And actually, Badr and I came up with something funny. We have a side quest. We actually want people to, on this data set that we've created, we want you to be able to, if you can find a specific company and match it to like one of the records in production data, so on the KVK website, like there's a separate prize for that. So yeah, that's it. That's my presentation. Any questions from anyone? Anything that anyone wants to add? No one? Okay, cool. Then I thank you guys for being here. I hope this was useful.